Hello, friends. If you've ever said, I tried keto, but it didn't work, or I'm scared of fat, this video is for you. Today, I'm going to walk you through the top 10 tips to start keto the right way. Not just what to eat, but why it works, what's happening inside your body, and how to use keto foods in real daily life. Because keto isn't a trend, it's metabolic science. Most people believe weight gain is a failure of discipline, a simple math problem of calories in and calories out. But the human body does not store fat because of math. It stores fat because of hormones. And the most powerful hormone controlling whether your body burns fuel or locks it away is insulin, a hormone released every time carbohydrates and sugar enter your bloodstream, quietly signaling your cells to stop burning fat and start storing it. And for decades, this signal has been firing nonstop in modern humans. Not because we eat too much food, but because we eat too many foods that spike insulin again and again from morning to night. Insulin's biological job is survival. It evolved to protect us during times of scarcity by storing excess energy as fat. But today, scarcity is gone while insulin stimulation is constant. And the body does exactly what it was designed to do, even when it destroys our health in the process. Research in endocrinology shows that insulin not only blocks fat burning, it actively shuts down lipolysis, meaning even if you reduce calories, your body can remain trapped in fat storage mode, creating the brutal cycle of hunger, fatigue, and weight regain that millions experience after dieting. This is why two people eating the same number of calories can have radically different outcomes, because insulin sensitivity, not calorie count, determines metabolic fate. When insulin stays high, fat is locked inside fat cells like money in a vault with no key. And the brain responds by increasing hunger, slowing metabolism, and conserving energy. Because from the body's perspective, stored fat is inaccessible and starvation appears imminent. This is not weakness. It is biology. Keto works because it interrupts this hormonal signal at its source, not by starving the body, but by changing the fuel it uses. When carbohydrates drop low enough, insulin levels fall, sometimes dramatically. And when insulin drops, a metabolic door opens that has been closed for years, allowing stored fat to finally be released and used as energy. This shift, called nutritional ketosis, is not dangerous or extreme. It is a normal human metabolic state documented in medical literature for over a century, used therapeutically for epilepsy since the 1920s, and now studied extensively for diabetes, obesity, and neurological health. In ketosis, the liver converts fat into ketone bodies, which become a clean, efficient fuel for the brain and muscles, producing fewer inflammatory byproducts than glucose metabolism and providing stable energy without crashes. Clinical studies show that lowering insulin through carbohydrate restriction improves insulin sensitivity, reduces triglycerides, increases HDL cholesterol, and lowers markers of systemic inflammation even when calories are not consciously restricted. This is the shocking truth most people never hear. When insulin is low, the body naturally regulates appetite because fat burning provides steady energy, removing the biological panic that drives overeating. This is why people on keto often report eating less without trying, not because of willpower, but because the brain is finally receiving consistent fuel. Type 2 diabetes, once considered a progressive disease, has been shown in multiple clinical interventions to improve or even reverse when insulin demand is reduced through carbohydrate restriction because the pancreas is allowed to rest and cells regain sensitivity to insulin signal. The fear around keto often centers on fat intake, yet decades of research reveal that dietary fat does not automatically become body fat. Insulin decides that fat, and without insulin's storage signal, fat is burned, not stored. Even more striking is what happens in the brain when insulin stabilizes. As insulin resistance has been linked to cognitive decline, leading some researchers to refer to Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes, a condition of impaired glucose metabolism in the brain. Ketones bypass this problem entirely, fueling neurons even when glucose uptake is impaired, which helps explain why many experience mental clarity, reduced anxiety, and improved focus when insulin spikes are removed. This is not a miracle. It is metabolic logic. The tragedy is that millions are still told to eat low-fat, high-carbohydrate diets that keep insulin elevated, trapping them in the very condition they are trying to escape. Every crash diet that ignores insulin teaches the body to conserve harder, resist weight loss more aggressively, and regain fat faster, reinforcing the myth that long-term change is impossible. Keto challenges this narrative by addressing the root cause rather than the symptom, shifting the body from constant storage mode into metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch between fuels as humans once did naturally. When insulin is no longer dominating every metabolic decision, the body becomes resilient again. Hunger becomes informational rather than urgent. Energy becomes stable rather than volatile. And fat loss becomes a byproduct of healing, not punishment. This is why keto is not about eating less, suffering more, or chasing a number on a scale. It is about restoring a hormonal environment where the body feels safe enough to let go of stored energy. The real revolution of keto is not weight loss, but liberation from a metabolic prison built by decades of misinformation. And once insulin is no longer the warden, the body remembers how to heal itself quietly, efficiently, and powerfully, exactly as it was designed to do. For decades, the world was told that fat was the enemy, that the very substance that makes up your brain, cushions your organs, and forms the walls of every single cell in your body was somehow responsible for modern disease. And that message didn't just change food labels, it rewired human biology in ways we are still paying for today. When fat was removed from food, it was replaced with sugar and refined carbohydrates. And as fat intake dropped, rates of obesity, diabetes, depression, and neurodegenerative disease exploded, a correlation so striking that it forced scientists to re-examine everything we thought we knew about nutrition. The human brain is nearly 60% fat by dry weight, and every electrical signal that becomes a thought, a memory, or an emotion depends on fatty acids forming stable cell membranes. Yet millions are running their brains on glucose spikes that rise and crash multiple times a day, creating inflammation, oxidative stress, and chemical instability at the cellular level. Research in neuroscience shows that diets rich in healthy fats support synaptic plasticity, the brain's ability to learn and adapt, while low-fat, high-sugar diets impair memory and accelerate cognitive decline, especially as insulin resistance increases with age. Keto flips this equation by providing the brain with ketones, a fuel source that produces more energy per unit of oxygen than glucose and generates fewer reactive oxygen species, meaning less cellular damage over time. This is not theory. Brain imaging studies show increased metabolic efficiency when ketones are present, particularly in regions associated with focus, mood regulation, and executive function. The fear of fat ignored a critical biological truth. Dietary fat does not automatically become body fat. Fat storage is hormonally regulated, and when insulin is low, fats are burned for energy, incorporated into cell structures, and used to produce hormones that regulate everything from mood to immune response. Cholesterol, once demonized, is now recognized as the backbone of steroid hormones like estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, and vitamin D. And without adequate dietary fat, the body struggles to maintain hormonal balance, leading to fatigue, anxiety, infertility, and weakened stress resilience. Studies show that low-fat diets are associated with higher rates of depression. While diets rich in omega-3 and monounsaturated fats correlate with improved mood and reduced inflammatory markers in the brain, inflammation is not just a physical issue. It alters neurotransmitter function, disrupts serotonin signaling, and has been linked to anxiety and depressive disorders. And sugar-driven diets are one of the strongest dietary drivers of chronic inflammation. Keto's emphasis on real fats like olive oil, butter, ghee, avocados, and fatty fish supplies the body with anti-inflammatory compounds that stabilize blood sugar and calm the nervous system, creating an internal environment where healing becomes possible. When blood sugar stops spiking, cortisol stops surging, and the brain exits survival mode, allowing higher cognitive functions to come back online. This is why so many people report mental clarity on keto, not as a placebo, but as a physiological response to steady energy delivery to neurons. Ketones cross the blood-brain barrier easily and fuel mitochondria directly, bypassing insulin-dependent pathways that fail in insulin resistance, which explains why ketogenic diets are being actively studied for Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and traumatic brain injury. Long before keto was popular, neurologists used high-fat ketogenic diets to treat drug-resistant epilepsy, reducing seizures by up to 50% or more, a result so powerful it could not be ignored. And this effect was later linked to ketones' ability to stabilize neuronal firing and reduce excitotoxicity in the brain. Healthy fats also play a critical role in gut health, and the gut-brain connection is now recognized as one of the strongest influences on mental well-being. The gut lining is built from fatty compounds, and diets deficient in fat weaken this barrier, increasing intestinal permeability, allowing inflammatory molecules to enter the bloodstream and trigger immune responses that reach the brain. Keto-style diets rich in fats and low in processed carbohydrates reduce gut inflammation, improve microbiome diversity, and decrease endotoxin exposure, which has been directly linked to improved mood and cognitive performance. On a cellular level, fats provide the raw materials for repairing damaged membranes, and damaged membranes mean impaired communication, whether in muscles, organs, or the brain itself. Aging is not just the passage of time, it is the accumulation of cellular damage. And fat-soluble antioxidants found in real foods work synergistically with dietary fat to protect cells from oxidative stress. Even more controversial is the role of saturated fat, long blamed for heart disease. Yet large meta-analyses have failed to show a clear link between saturated fat intake and cardiovascular mortality. While insulin resistance and chronic inflammation remain the strongest predictors of heart disease, when keto replaces sugar and refined grains with stable fats, triglycerides drop, HDL cholesterol often rises, and small, dense LDL particles, the most dangerous type, frequently decrease, reflecting an improvement in metabolic health rather than deterioration. Energy stability is another overlooked benefit. Fat provides 9 calories per gram and releases energy slowly, meaning the body no longer experiences the crashes that drive cravings, irritability, and compulsive eating. This steadiness affects behavior, decision, and emotional regulation because the brain no longer perceives constant energy threat. Hunger becomes quieter, thoughts become clearer, and the nervous system shifts from fight or flight to repair and regeneration. The most shocking truth is that humans evolved primarily on fat and protein for hundreds of thousands of years, with carbohydrates available only seasonally. And our physiology still reflects that evolutionary blueprint. Keto does not introduce something unnatural. It removes the constant sugar exposure that never existed before modern agriculture and food processing. When healthy fats become the foundation of nutrition, the body remembers how to function efficiently. The brain regains clarity, inflammation recedes, and healing shifts from being forced to being allowed. This is why keto is not about eating fat recklessly, but about choosing fats that communicate safety, stability, and nourishment at the cellular level. And when the body receives that message consistently, it responds with resilience, focus, and a calm strength that no low-fat, high-sugar diet has ever been able to deliver. Most people don't fail keto because they lack discipline. They fail because no one warned them that the human body is electrically alive, that every heartbeat, every nerve impulse, every thought in your brain depends on tiny charged minerals called electrolytes. And when those minerals fall, the body doesn't whisper for help. It screams. The moment carbohydrates are reduced, insulin drops. And when insulin drops, the kidneys receive a powerful signal to release stored sodium and water, a process well documented in nephrology and endocrinology research, yet rarely explained to beginners. This rapid fluid loss is why people celebrate early weight loss on keto. But it is also why headaches, dizziness, fatigue, heart palpitations, muscle cramps, and anxiety suddenly appear not as signs of danger, but as signs of depletion. Sodium, potassium, and magnesium are not optional supplements. They are foundational elements of life. And when they fall too low, the nervous system enters a state of alarm. Studies show that sodium is essential for maintaining blood volume and nerve conduction. And when sodium drops, blood pressure falls, oxygen delivery decreases, and the brain interprets this as a threat, triggering fatigue, confusion, and panic-like symptoms. Potassium is critical for heart rhythm and muscle contraction, and even mild potassium deficiency has been linked to weakness, irregular heartbeat, and impaired glucose metabolism. Magnesium, the most overlooked mineral in modern diets, is required for over 300 enzymatic reactions, including ATP production, the molecule that fuels every cell. And deficiency has been associated with insomnia, anxiety, depression, insulin resistance, and chronic inflammation. When people start keto without replenishing electrolytes, they often describe feeling off, unmotivated, snorts, or suddenly emotional, and many quit, believing the diet is harming them, when in reality, their cells are starving for minerals they are rapidly losing through urine. This phenomenon, often called the keto flu, is not an infection, not a detox, and not a failure of adaptation. It is an electrolyte crisis, and it is entirely preventable. Research on low-carbohydrate diets consistently shows increased sodium excretion in the first weeks. And populations following ketogenic or fasting-based lifestyles who thrive long-term, such as certain ancestral or therapeutic groups, consciously replace salt and minerals as part of daily life. Without electrolytes, the body cannot maintain electrical gradients across cell membranes. And without those gradients, communication breaks down, muscles misfire, and the brain loses clarity. This is why people report brain fog on poorly executed keto and mental sharpness on properly supported keto, not because of carbs alone, but because neurons require stable sodium and potassium gradients to transmit signals efficiently. Consistency becomes the second pillar of success because the body does not adapt to chaos. It adapts to patterns. Metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch between fuels, develops only when insulin remains consistently low enough for long enough to retrain enzymes, mitochondria, and hormonal feedback loops. Every time carbs are reintroduced impulsively, insulin spikes again, fat burning pauses, and the adaptation clock resets, creating a frustrating cycle of progress and regression. Research in metabolic physiology shows that enzyme expression involved in fat oxidation increases over weeks, not days. And inconsistency prevents these pathways from fully activating. This is why people who dabble in keto often feel terrible, while those who commit to consistency report energy stability, appetite regulation, and improved mood. The brain, in particular, is sensitive to fuel inconsistency. Rapid swings between glucose dependence and fat adaptation create neurochemical instability, contributing to irritability and cravings. Consistency allows ketone production to stabilize, providing the brain with a predictable energy supply that reduces the stress response. Cortisol, the stress hormone, rises when the body perceives uncertainty, whether from caloric restriction, blood sugar swings, or mineral imbalance. And elevated cortisol not only impairs fat loss, but worsens sleep, immunity, and mental health. Studies show that stable blood sugar and adequate mineral intake blunt cortisol release, shifting the body from survival mode into repair mode. This is why keto done correctly often improves sleep after the initial transition, while keto done inconsistently leads to exhaustion and burnout. The shocking truth is that many symptoms blamed on keto are identical to symptoms of dehydration and electrolyte deficiency seen in endurance athletes and hospitalized patients. Yet, the solution is rarely presented with urgency. Sodium restriction, long promoted for heart health, has been increasingly questioned in the scientific literature, with large population studies showing that excessively low sodium intake is associated with higher mortality, particularly in insulin-resistant individuals. On keto, where insulin is low, sodium needs are higher, not lower, because insulin normally signals the kidneys to retain sodium, and without it, sodium loss accelerates. This physiological reality does not care about dietary myths. It follows hormonal signals with precision. Magnesium deficiency alone affects an estimated half of the population, and modern soil depletion and food processing have made adequate intake increasingly rare, even before dietary changes. When keto increases urinary magnesium loss, symptoms can intensify unless addressed intentionally. Consistency in electrolyte intake is as important as consistency in food choice because minerals do not store easily in the body. They require daily replenishment. The human nervous system evolved in environments where mineral-rich water, salt, and whole foods were readily available, not in a world of distilled beverages and processed meals. When those minerals are restored, something profound happens. The body calms down, heart rhythm stabilizes, muscles relax, mental noise quiets, and energy becomes smooth instead of jagged. This calm is not psychological, it is physiological. It reflects a nervous system no longer fighting internal shortages. Consistency also teaches the gut to adapt, improving absorption efficiency and reducing gastrointestinal distress that often accompanies dietary change. Over time, hunger signals recalibrate, driven by stable leptin and ghrelin patterns rather than emergency cravings. The body stops asking for quick sugar fixes because it trusts that energy is coming steadily. This trust is built through repetition, not perfection. Missing electrolytes for even a single day can undo progress, triggering symptoms that feel disproportionate but are rooted in cellular signaling failure. When people understand this, keto stops feeling fragile and starts feeling robust. It becomes a system supported by physiology, not a test of willpower. The final uncomfortable truth is that the body will always choose survival over aesthetics. And without minerals and consistency, keto feels like a threat. With them, it feels like relief. Healing accelerates not when the body is forced, but when it is supported. And electrolytes are the silent support system that determines whether keto becomes a short-lived experiment or a sustainable path. When sodium, potassium, and magnesium are restored daily, and when carbohydrate restriction is applied consistently enough for adaptation to occur, the body stops resisting and starts cooperating. Energy rises, clarity returns, cravings fade, and the metabolic machinery hums quietly in the background, no longer fighting, no longer confused, simply doing what it was always designed to do when given the right signals every single